Patti, and Dan, and unmute yourself. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan and Patti, and they're going to do the presentation. I will be looking at the participant list and the chat box and helping with questions at the end. My name's Terry Egan, and I'm the chair of Dementia Friendly Missoula. Hey, Dan and Patti.
Can you bring up the slideshow, please? Okay, welcome everyone. A few things to note before we get started. Those of you pre-registered should have gotten 3 files. One is the Dementia Friendly America Sector Guides for libraries. There's also a publication by the Dementia Friendly Missoula of some library scenarios with some specific situations that can come up in libraries themselves and relating those to being more dementia friendly. And then also this presentation is available as one of those files. We're going to be going through the slides pretty quickly, and there's a lot of things that are resources and references that I know you'll want to go back and look at, and we're not going to talk about them individually. If you haven't gotten the 3 files from us, if you're tuning in late, we will email them. And also there's a recording being made of the slide presentation, and that'll be made available to anybody who's interested to go back and look at it later on. One thing that's important is that we need to have the names and email addresses of everyone who's participating. And sometime during the presentation, if go ahead and use the chat function to send your name and email. Don't all try and do it at once. Also, we're going to try and hold off on answering questions to the end. You can send questions via the chat function. To the extent that we have time to answer them kind of live, we will do that. If not, we will answer your questions later on in the day. All right.
Dan, I just wanted to interrupt for a second. Colette did put a link in the chat box for all the handouts. If you don't have those, you can get them there.
Next slide. Terry. Next slide, Terry. Thanks. My name is Dan Doyle, retired University of Montana professor, lots of experience in gerontology. Co-presenter today is another volunteer trainer with Dementia Friendly Missoula, Patti Holkup. Retired Montana State University professor of nursing with lots of professional experience working in the field of geriatrics and quite a bit of personal experience in working with persons with dementia. Next slide. The Dementia Friendly Missoula is providing this presentation today, as we do other presentations. Dementia Friendly Missoula is affiliated with Missoula Aging Services and is a member of the Dementia Friendly America Community Network. Next slide. This is our mission statement, which tells a little bit about where we're coming from, promoting an informed, supportive, and inclusive community for people living with dementia and for those who care for them. Next slide. Dementia Friendly Missoula partners with Missoula Aging Services. Missoula Aging Services is the area agency on aging that covers Missoula County. Next slide. Missoula Aging Services has its own mission statement here that you can read. I'm going to turn over the presentation now to Patti, who will give you some background on dementia. Patti, are you unmuted?
Thanks. I thought I was. Okay, well, I wanted to say dementia is not a specific disease. It is a general term that describes a wide range of symptoms associated with a gradual decline in memory or other thinking skills that can become severe enough to reduce a person's ability to perform everyday activities. There are 3 progressive phases, and this is along a continuum. The first is pre-symptomatic. Before any signs of memory loss are happening, for about 20 years, that there can be changes in the brain, slow, gradual changes. Then there is mild cognitive impairment. People can be aware of cognitive decline, and there was a kind of a myth that said if you're worried about having Alzheimer's, you don't have it. But in fact, subjective experience of memory decline is very valid and needs to be looked at. If you say that to the doctor, they now are starting to look for that. Then there is mild cognitive impairment. Well, I've just said that. Then there is the actual dementia as it comes on, again along a continuum, early, middle, and severe. In the early stages, a person is still quite active, can be driving, working, being part of social activities. But again, they are aware that they might be having memory problems. Sometimes difficulty with planning or organizing. Moderate is starting to have forgetfulness of events about one's own personal history, those things that we never thought we would forget. Sometimes faltering on address and telephone number, an increased risk of wandering or becoming lost. And in the severe stages, it is quite a bit worse. Need round-the-clock assistance with daily activities and personal care. They can lose awareness of recent experiences. They might have, they do have increased difficulty communicating, and they become a little bit more vulnerable to infections, probably because their overall health is declining with the onset of dementia and limitations to what they were accustomed to doing in terms of physical exercise. Next slide. Okay, this slide gives you an idea that it is a general term, an umbrella term. And it is a range of symptoms associated with cognitive impairment. There are probably 15 or 20 different pathologies underlying different dementia symptoms, symptoms of dementia. And these are the top 4. So you can see Alzheimer's is the one that is most common. And in the brain, people will find, or pathologists will find plaques and tangles, and these are from the destruction of the nerve cells. And I've described the symptoms kind of along that continuum on the previous slide. Vascular is the next common, and vascular can be related to high blood pressure, as well as to having maybe arteries that have plaques that have deposited along the inside. So it's definitely a cardiovascular difficulty. And the symptoms depend on the location or size of where there might be a blockage in the brain, or a small bleed or a larger bleed. If there are larger bleeds, you might see a stepwise trajectory of decreasing cognitive abilities. Often vascular disease and Alzheimer's disease occur together. I think vascular dementia can occur with other dementias too. Lewy body is very closely associated with Parkinson's disease. symptoms, well, the accumulation of Lewy body proteins are found within the neurons themselves. Can have sleep disturbances, some visual hallucinations. You might find more muscle rigidity and difficulty. Facial expressions have decreased, so there's more what they might call a mask-like face. Frontotemporal lobar dementia in the brain, there's shrinkage of the brain in the frontal, that's kind of in the forehead part and the sides above the ears. This is again due to neuronal damage. Changes in personality, because the frontal lobe is the lobe that has the personality, the thinking, the problem solving, this sort of thing. It also can occur at a younger age. And then of course, mixed dementia we've already talked about. So I will say, we'll go to the next slide. So, and the next slide now too. We had to decide good news versus bad news. Which should we do first? Well, we decided to do the good news first. Recent research reports that lifestyle changes may reduce your risk of dementia, regardless of genetic risk. Here are some of the risk factors. These come from the Lancet commissioned report. There was one in 2017 and another in 2020. In 2020, they added a couple more risk factors. But these are all potentially modifiable lifestyle risk factors. And they count for up to about 40% of dementia diagnoses. So that is really good news. I put the asterisks on the ones that actually dementia-friendly communities can help address. So there's exercise. If people are out and about in the community, because they feel comfortable there and the community knows how to receive them, they're active, keeping your mind active if you're involved in other social activities. And the library here, for one thing, provides a memory cafe once a month, and folks come there. That keeps their brains active, and they are connected with other folks. Checking your hearing, of course, that doesn't have anything to do with dementia friendly, but controlling blood pressure, managing weight, all of those things help and work together to address some of these risk factors. Blood pressure, weight is also, if you're out and about getting some exercise, that helps. So, and I have put down several sources that verify these risk factors and if they're addressed. Okay, next slide. So here we come to the not so good news, and we'll go right into the next slide after that. Alzheimer's is a public health crisis. However, even that is good news. It was determined in 2018, CDC declared dementia's public health crisis, with the building our largest dementia infrastructure, the BOLD bill for Alzheimer's. This means that there is another approach to Alzheimer's or dementia. Rather than being fatalistic, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, we already do know now that there is stuff you can do about it. Just give the diagnosis and the person goes home and isolates. So instead, they're looking at Alzheimer's disease or dementia as a much more holistic perspective. And the biggest thing that I see is the amount of research now that is coming out about quality of life, lifestyle changes, using some of those risk factors and trying to control for them in both control and other groups. So that is exciting to me, rather than just looking for a pill that's going to take care of it and cure the disease. We're not there yet. They are continuing, though, to work on drugs. But here you can see it is the 5th largest leading cause of death in the US. And it's the only one right now without a way to cure it. But I think there are ways to treat it. And we've just been talking about those. So that I will say, we can move on to the next one. The burden is large here in Montana, and this comes from the Alzheimer's Association fact and figures, and this can be accessed from the references at the end, as Dan mentioned. 22,000 people aged 65 and older, and expected to reach as high as 27,000 by 2025, which is 3 years away. Next slide, and I think this, because dementia doesn't end or shouldn't end when life doesn't end when dementia begins. I think that we've already talked about that. People are still themselves. They can't remember, and it is a gradually declining phase. So it's important to remember that and to keep people, to decrease the stigma around dementia, both internally and externally, and stay active. Thank you. Next slide.
I want to talk about what it means to create a dementia-friendly community, which of course is what the Dementia Friendly America and Dementia Friendly Missoula is trying to achieve. And these are things that libraries can certainly play an important part in raising awareness of the problems, challenging the stigmas attached to it, increasing understanding across the community, and also providing education to community sectors. And that's what we do. Next slide, please. There are certain characteristics you find in dementia-friendly communities. They are informed, safe, respectful, foster a quality of life, and empower citizens with dementia. So these are what we would like a community to look like. So being dementia-friendly means being able to understand what dementia is, recognize it when we find it, develop good communication that can help effectively communicate with persons living with that dementia, identifying and implementing some dementia-friendly practices. We'll talk a little bit later on about things that can be done in terms of staff training, and an audit of the physical environment within your libraries. And of course, libraries are specialists in resource location, so knowing where to locate dementia resources and also support systems within the community. And then something else that we'll talk about a little bit later on is so many people, including some people who are on the staffs of your various libraries, are caregivers, and maybe you yourself are a caregiver to a person with dementia. And how can we support those people? Next slide, please. Living with dementia is tough enough for the affected persons and the persons who are dealing with them, but there are things that all of us can be doing to make things better. People in the earlier stage of dementia, they want the same things that everybody else wants. They want to be able to make plans, to control their lives. They want to be able to feel like they have a place in their communities, socialize with friends and family, continue to do those everyday sorts of things that most of us take for granted, and they want to continue to do those as long as possible. Next slide. In talking to persons with dementia and their caregivers, we can identify things that are internal, that is, within the person living with dementia, that may keep them from feeling like they are valued members of their community. Sometimes they feel stigmatized, shamed, embarrassed about their circumstances. They worry about getting lost, simple things like that. And they just don't want to be a burden on others. Overcoming these internal barriers is hard enough, especially when there are some external barriers too. And here's where a lot of all of us as individuals and as institutions, including libraries, can take some action to tear down barriers. Things that we could do to be more supportive. Can we provide appropriate programming? Can we make it easier for persons with dementia to find their way around? Can we learn to recognize dementia and learn to communicate more effectively with those who have that dementia? Next slide. In interviewing persons in the earlier stages of dementia, these are the kinds of things that they frequently mention in problems with communicating with others. They spoke too quickly, it was too loud, too much talk, it confused me, wouldn't even look me in the eye. I felt rushed and they treated me like I didn't care. And these are the lived experience of people with dementia. Now back to Patti. Patti?
I didn't unmute myself again, I'm sorry. Yes, we're going to take a look at memory loss next and how to recognize it, I guess. I really want to draw your attention to the dementia-friendly scenarios that are part of your handouts, and this was developed by Marge. It is excellent. It goes through the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and describes scenarios of under which you might see an individual with dementia. I also want to draw your attention to the citations at the bottom of that list, because you can go to get directly to download Alzheimer's Association Dementia 10 Warning Signs. And I bring this up because whenever we talk about signs, if you're like me, I apply them to myself. And this document also differentiates between dementia and maybe normal signs of aging. So let's move on here. Possible clues that you see someone come into your library and they're looking or just saying they're confused. They might have difficulty in making choices. You know, what book do I want? Or searching. Speech might be difficult to understand, or they might ask the same question over and over again. Difficulty handling money, there you probably won't see that. So those are some of the things that you can say, all right, this person might be having a difficult time with cognitions. And we have to remember, dementia is an invisible disability. You can't tell by looking at someone that they have dementia. Next slide. So helpful approaches, come up to them, make good eye contact, a friendly smile, and as we've already said, slowing speech, one question at a time. And if the question is repeated, you can give the direction once, continuing to say it in the same way. And then giving them time to respond. Sometimes the processing takes a little bit of time to come up with the word they might be looking for or whatever. Next slide. Again, offer to help. How can I help you? You can try different forms of communication. And I use an example from my own mother. I'd come to her and say, hey, Mom, do you want to go out to the mall today? And she'd say, I don't know. I think I've got to ask my mom. And I think, oh, I asked that question. She has trouble making choices. So I go out and come back and say, Mom, why don't we get our coats? It's time to go out today. And off we go. Reduce distractions. That's that noise, too loud. Be calm, be kind, be patient, embrace their reality. So if they're asking the question over and over, it's because to them, they've not asked it again. Be with them where they are. That's very, very important. Okay, next slide. I think that this might be Dan's. Yep.
Yeah, in addition to those communication sort of tips, another important aspect of creating dementia-friendly communities is creating dementia-friendly environments. Looking at the physical environment, which can make a big difference in whether a library or other location is dementia-friendly or not. And a lot of these things can be done at little cost, but others are big ticket items. For example, we talk about having family restrooms that may involve a major remodel. But there are ways to make it easier for everyone, but especially those who are experiencing dementia, to find their way in, out, and around in your building. Using things like good lighting, good signage. If you need to replace the flooring, think about what it looks like to a person with dementia. A lot of busy patterning can be confusing and upsetting. One thing that's been found was that if you have a carpeting or a rug and it has a black space in the middle of it, sometimes people with dementia will see that as looking like a hole, and they'll not want to cross that threshold. So if you're needing to replace your flooring or needing to do painting or upgrading your signage, these are some things to keep in mind. They're having quiet areas, places where away from the hustle and the bustle, if you can manage that. And I mentioned family restrooms. Next slide, please. Clutter is confusing. Large open areas can be made less intimidating if there are sort of intermediate places to sit down if someone has to cross a large area. The Dementia Friendly America's library sector handout, which has been made available to you, has a pretty long list of specific ideas as to how to make your library more dementia friendly. Again, oftentimes at little cost, or perhaps as part of your regular maintenance or upgrades that you're doing. Patti. Are you there, Patti?
I wasn't unmuted. Again, I apologize. Anyhow, we're going to move into talking a little bit about dementia and caregivers, the caregiving with them. Caregiving as the disease progresses can be a 24/7 job. And there has to be a balance between the individual's capabilities and abilities. And this is the caregiver that we're talking about. There are a lot of resources in the community for caregivers, and
next slide
needs to be, yes, please get the next slide. I'm sorry. Yes, it's been considered a 24/7 job, as I've said, balance between abilities and capabilities. It gets increasingly difficult as dementia progresses, and there are resources in the community. People who are caregiving need assistance and should not be ashamed or hesitant or feel like they're betraying their loved one by reaching out. And Missoula Aging Services is in our community, or any area agency on aging is the best place to look for those kinds of resources. We are fortunate to have a lot. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. This is very interesting. 1 out of 6 employees are caregivers, and 60% are female, 40% are male, and 25% are millennials. And I read those off to you because I was quite surprised to see those statistics. So it is important to think about caregiving staff. Next slide. And these we're going over quickly because there's just so much to give you, but we wanted you to have the copies of the slides at least. So people who are caregiving, sometimes you can see they're feeling stressed, anxious. Yep, there is a stigma, reluctant to talk to others. If I tell people I'm caregiving, are they going to think I'm not pulling my full weight as an employee? peer colleagues may feel resentful if they are allowed time off to take their patient to a doctor, or if they haven't been able to find someone who will be with their loved one. The increased out-of-pocket expenses, this is from the AARP, which is also referenced at the end of these slides. $7,000 a year. So they need to work, they want to work. This also, they don't have time for their own health needs, loneliness, isolation, stress-related diseases, cardiovascular diseases. So this is very important. Then the person needs to start taking care of themselves or doesn't. Next slide. Okay, this is kind of to help encourage the institution to think about caregiving staff and why it's a good thing to support them. Helps to maximize productivity. Person can feel less stressed. It keep people involved, and I think today more and more families are being considered, whether it's dementia or not, and can reduce healthcare costs when the caregiver gets sick. Next slide. These are some things to think about, leave and flex time. And I think with COVID, we seem to be more flexible. People are able to work from home. And so that's a good thing. Just be aware of resources for caregivers. Like we have 2 Alzheimer's, caregiver support groups at Missoula Aging Services provides. And I think that we will go into the next one, and this is Dan again.
Yeah, we're getting kind of close to the end of our presentation, but I do want to re-emphasize how important libraries specifically are in making communities dementia friendly. As you know, libraries are part of the social fabric of a community. Sometimes they're the community center, places that are safe, they're open to everybody. These are places, as you know, to learn, to gather, community learning centers, if you will. And there's a lot of research that shows that libraries can have significant impact. Research shows, for example, that even persons who are in mid to late stages of dementia can benefit from some of the things libraries offer. Reading itself or being read to can help delay or reduce dementia symptoms, according to the research. Participating in library-based programs can decrease isolation, increase well-being, according to researchers. And so what are some specific examples of the impact libraries can have in creating dementia-friendly communities? Think about your collection development policies. Do you have books about dementia for adults and for children? There are some great books out there that help kids. Imagine if you're a 6-year-old and your beloved grandparent suddenly doesn't seem to recognize you anymore. How do you explain that? There's some helpful literature out there. You can be a source for brochures, community resources. Missoula Public Library has what they call memory making kits. They have manipulatives, they have instructions, they have suggestions, and these can be checked out. Not very expensive to put together. Outreach programming is important, bringing the library to senior residences. So do outreach to assisted living facilities around the Missoula area here at the Missoula Public Library. Specific library programs within the library. Memory Cafe was mentioned earlier, once a month here. Tales and Travel is kind of a virtual travel program. Read aloud times, opportunities to create poetry. The Montana State University Extension has a program called Using Storytelling to Teach About Alzheimer's. And all of these things are available at low or no cost. And of course, libraries serve as a gathering place. If you make available rooms, for groups to gather, support groups for the care partners or for the adults with dementia, and make available quiet places within the library for those who can benefit from that. Next slide, please. Again, I want to refer you to one of the brochures that we've got there. It's from Dementia Friendly America, and they call it the Library Sector Guide. And also the brochure from Dementia Friendly Missoula that also has some really good information about real world scenarios that come up in the library. And these can serve as a source of these brochures as a source of information, but also you could use them within staff training as discussion starters in a staff training. Next slide, please. I want to talk to you about some community resources that you may want to be able to tap into. And I'm just going to go through these very quickly because, of course, you can go back and look at these slides and tap into them. We've got a lot of websites attached to them too. Lots of brochures that are available from the Alzheimer's Association, Dementia Friendly America, Dementia Friendly Missoula, other groups that are out there. Next slide. Some Missoula specific resources. Missoula Aging Services, of course, the Missoula Public Library's Memory Cafe. There's a program at the local art museum here called Art in the Moment that's been very beneficial to persons with Alzheimer's or other dementias and their caregivers. Memory loss conversations, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Support groups. Next slide, some state resources here. And again, you can check these out at your leisure when you have the time. Next slide. The area agencies on aging, you can see our little map here. Every county in the country has a designated area agency on aging. Sometimes there's multiple counties within a given area agency on aging. And they oftentimes are a good source of information. And if they don't have programming specifically through their agency, they can refer you to others who do. So you can check out the area agency in Montana, or if you're one of the out-of-staters who are joining us today, your local area agency on aging. Next slide, please. Some of these things do cost some money, oftentimes not a lot of money, but there are some grant funding resources out there that you may want to tap into. For example, if you are in Montana, the Montana Geriatric Education Center, which is at the University of Montana, I've worked with for many, many years, has a small grants program that's open to Montana libraries and other groups that might want to get a small grant to help them get started, perhaps for getting some materials or setting up some programming. And so there's a link there for you, those of you who are from Montana, that you can check out later on and apply the next round of grant funding. Simple application will open on April 1 and close on May 31st for funds that would be available in later on this year. Next slide, please. I mentioned the Montana State University Extension Office also offers some resources and has some programming available at no cost to you. And if you are from out of state, you might check out your local extension office and see what they may have to offer. All right, Patti.
There we go. Got it. Along those same lines, and before I start talking about this particular slide, Dementia Friendly Missoula also sends out a newsletter once a month, Dementia Friendly Missoula Info to Share. And if you would like to be, or your library would like to receive that newsletter, please put your name and email in the chat. And there as we were talking about the extension, there are always programs that they are offering along the lines of finances and end of life and doing wills and this sort of thing. There are other resources as well, as Dan mentioned. This is this memory loss conversations is a group for people living with the early stages of dementia, and there are support groups for caregivers, but there was not a support group for people living with dementia. And so that we've just started that. It's been going since about last February, so it's almost a year. It is held via Zoom at the participants' request, because it is easier. Don't have to worry about getting a ride during some of these cold winter months. Don't have to drive. We meet via Zoom. But by having it via Zoom, we can meet across the state. Currently, we have people from Missoula and someone from Billings joining in. Meet once a week at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And if you have questions or would like to register, please call what you see there, which is Missoula Aging Services phone number. And this is hosted by Dementia Friendly Missoula, but in affiliation with Missoula Aging Services. It is a great group, and it shows, I guess, the personhood of each individual. They may be having memory loss, but we talk about so many things. And I come away with being inspired, because I hear wisdom in these groups every time I'm there. So please think about this and share it. I'd be happy to send a flyer. Also, if you ask for that in chat to put up in your libraries. Let's see, do we have anything else here? No, I think we go now from there into national resources. Next slide. And I don't need to read these to you. Excellent resources at all of these URLs that you see here. Dementia Friendly America, National Institute on Aging, the Center for Dementia Education. Next is best practices and webinars. And Marge put this together, and it also is excellent. I have gone in and looked at them and also attended the webinar that was held not too long ago and just learned so much from that. Okay, next slide. Again, it's continued. We gave a lot of references because we knew we'd be going through this quickly and wanted you to have access to them. So we'll go next slide again. This is references specific to library, and hold some of the references that Dan mentioned earlier. Okay, next slide. And these are references that I've mentioned, fact and figures. And then within the fact and figures is taking a look at this special report, More Than Normal Aging, Understanding Mild Cognitive Impairment. And the other more scientifically based, Livingston twice there, the 2017 risk factors. Next slide. And continued. Excellent resources here throughout. And with that, I think we are at the end.
Yeah, if we, I guess we will have some time to take some questions. And I know you put some of them in the chat. I'm not sure how best to proceed. Terry, do you want to just tell us something in the chat, or do we want to take some live questions at this point?
We can go ahead and see if there's any live questions. Please share application. Oh, and then I will for share the application link for the MTGEC award. Those are awards that they're giving out to community awards, they're called. And then someone else had asked a little ways back about some of the things that we're talking about with dementia, and some of the tips and techniques that they are the same as other neuro diseases or concerns that might be with children or other adults. And so do you have a comment about that, Patti?
Yes, and that is true. They can be very, very similar. Quiet rooms, responding to them in their reality, communication skills, and the environment too, in terms of not having it too stimulating. So yes, indeed, they are similar.
I think it applies to a lot of persons who are on the autism spectrum. A lot of the same techniques can help them too.
Mm-hmm. Also, someone who might be experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, who have a higher anxiety threshold, sudden sounds can startle them into a flashback. Right now, Missoula County International Airport, and Marge has spearheaded this project, is making certain that their airport, along with complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but is specifically focused on making it easier for people with hidden disabilities to be able to function and move around in their facility.
Now, there is a specific dementia-friendly working group that works with airports, and they can, especially if the airport in your area is doing a remodel or a redesign. They built a new terminal here in Missoula just over the last few years, and they were very open to allowing us to talk to them about things that they could incorporate into the design features of that airport. And it's, if any of you have come into Missoula recently, you know it's a wonderful space, and it not only is a nice space to look at, but also is friendly for travelers who have these kind of various hidden disabilities, including dementia.
And in the chat box, we have George Griffith Strawley, who says he works for the network of the National Library of Medicine, part of the NIH. And he said that we offer funding for health information outreach and programming in addition to other sources mentioned. I think we should consider an application. I think we would consider an application from a library for dementia-related programming. And in the chat, he's going to share, or he's been asked to share the link, and he did. He shared the link for that application, and also that you can contact him with questions. So that's about 9:14 to 9:18. That chat is running. So
thank you.
And Barry, I think you had mentioned when we were preparing that you'll have a record of all the chat comments and questions that will be available to folks.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll have it, and if there's relevant things, I think that was pretty much the only question in there. If you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and ask a question at this time.
Well, maybe we could ask a question. Has anyone experienced realizing that one of your patrons might be having some cognitive difficulties, and what have you done about that?
We had a patron who continually lost her books or thought she returned them and did not. So we worked with her as best we could and made sure her fines disappeared. She did pay a couple of times, but she was, just being very patient with her. realizing that she didn't understand what was going on, and just kind of being where she was, as you've said, and not accusing her of anything, just working with her and being very patient. So that worked pretty well, and giving her other options too. You know, her card was blocked for a little while, so making sure she knew she could take the donation books and things like that and still gain access to reading.
You know, I occasionally help out with the senior outreach program they have here, taking books out to the assisted living facilities. And that, of course, can be a problem of getting the books back. But one of the things that Missoula Public Library has done is they will actually check out the book to the organization, to the assisted living facility, and then that gives the activities director or whoever's working with the library as a liaison the opportunity to, you know, go and say, okay, we're missing this book, let's go and take a look in your room and see if we can find it, that sort of thing. But of course, you know, our philosophy sounds similar to your philosophy, which is they're just books, and it's better to have the books in people's hands and not worry about the fines or whatever. You know, these are people who deserve our empathy.
One of the things that I guess I'd like to bring up too, not along those same lines, but we give presentations such as we've just done to other groups in the community, like restaurants, faith communities, banks, those sorts of things. Do you know if there's anyone in your community who might like to have something like this presentation?
I've also given talks basically on to faith-based communities on kind of the spirituality of dementia, kind of a specialized sort of thing, but there's information available on that too.
Service groups are another that we've given presentations to.
So are there other questions or comments before we leave? A couple people are saying thank you. And I said, Patti and Dan and I are volunteers. We are retired now, the three of us. And so I apologize for a little rough start at the beginning there. And it just haven't run a Zoom meeting like this for a bit. So now I have to go back and remember how to do some of these things.
Right. And I so appreciate your help, Terry. And I would also like to say Dementia Friendly Missoula meets once a month on Wednesday. I think it's the third Wednesday of the month from 3 to 4:30. And if anyone is interested in seeing how something like this might work in your community, you certainly would be welcome to attend a meeting. But again, we need to know who you are.
And those meetings are Zoom meetings?
They can be Zoom meetings, yes. Mm-hmm. They are or a combination of in-person Zoom.
Just a reminder before people leave, make sure we do have your name and your email address so that we can tell our funding sources how many people we've had visiting, and also those of you who are looking for continuing education credits can get credit. So unless there's anything else, Terry, do you think we can sign off and let these good people get back to work?
Yep, I think so. I think we're good. Thank you all very much for attending today, and hope that you have some information and inspiration to go and see what kinds of changes you might be able to make within your own community libraries. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your attendance.